Let's see if I can. Here, let's just move this over here a little bit. I think because of that, it's backwards. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Because the picture coming at me is backwards.
So how do you do it?
So it's backwards. It doesn't matter. Okay.
So you can't never use a whiteboard on it?
Well, I'd have to turn it around, basically. Someone else would have to man it. It doesn't matter. Let's just leave it like this. Okay. Today, we're opening up another dimension, another element of Kabbalistic concepts. And that is the concept of thought, speech, and action. Thought, speech, and action are grouped together in Kabbalah because we call them the garments of the soul. Think about it a second. You have a garment. You have clothes. Depending on how you want to express yourself to the outer world is the kind of clothes you put on. When you go to the gym, you put on gym clothes. When you go to a sporting event, you put on the clothes of probably that team that you want to support. When you go to an opera, you're probably going to put on a tuxedo and a bow tie. When you go to synagogue, you're probably going to put on more formal clothes. But your soul also has clothes. Your soul also has a way that it can also put on and take off its clothes. What are the clothes of the soul? Thought, speech, and action. So now, if you remember, we spoke about this idea of kochot hanefesh, the power of the soul, the kochot of the soul.
That's what the Sefirot are called.
The Sefirot are called the kochot hanefesh.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they are the power of the soul. Now, these ideas, they're also called mehut ha'adam, the person's true essence. Kabbalah explains that mahut ha'adam, which means the person's essence, doesn't change easily. Basically, we are who we are. A person is who they are. You can't just expect that all of a sudden someone's going to have some kind of existential experience and they're going to change the person. There are people who do that. But generally, in a person's lifetime, they are who they are. They were created, we are all created, with a certain way of thinking, with a certain way of feeling. But what are we able to change? If you ask someone to change, if you want to change a behavior, what element of your behavior? You can't change who you are. You can't change your essence. You're wired a certain way. Men are wired a certain way. Women are wired a different way than men. It's part of the issues that people have with relationships in general.
But
So,
you can change it.
what?
You can change
You
it.
can change the following: thought, speech, and action.
You can't change your essence.
At this point in our studies, no.
Is the essence a godly soul?
The essence is would be the godly soul.
But everyone doesn't have the same essence?
Does everyone have the same essence? I'm being careful here, not to push ahead, because I could answer that question in its entirety, but I think that you don't have enough of the background to be able to really properly.
But I think like maybe your way to answer this is that if the person's essence, right? We're talking about the person's essence. We're not talking about the ultimate essence of the entire universe.
Yeah, sure.
The person. So, as far as the person is involved, I think back to the concept like ta'anuk or a
Yes.
concept like
Pleasure, right?
pleasure. Yeah.
Exactly.
Things change.
Yeah, but it's like a person has an essence. The person has a personal essence that is kind of
Yeah, but
unique to them.
he said, I'm trying to figure out what it is. Like, okay,
So
is
today-
it the godly soul? Is it the Sefirot? Like,
Today,
what
today,
is it?
let's focus on if you wanted to change on a very basic level. And that change would come from in one in three ways, or all three ways, and that is thought, speech, and action.
I need to understand where the essence.
So I'm going to explain to you. Changing your essence, according to Kabbalah, can only happen if God grants a gift. Which we call the gift. To clarify this, we have to understand what are the outlets that the soul has. In other words, the sechel, the mind, and the midot, the actions or the traits, are part and parcel of your very being. They have a means by which they express themselves. We call them levushei hanefesh, the garments of the soul.
It's like a name.
It's like a name. There are garments. They consist of 3 garments: machshava, thought; dibur, speech; and ma'aseh, action. These 3 garments are analogous to clothing. Just like you can change your clothing, you can also change your garments of the soul. In a spiritual level, the more a person refines thought, the more a person refines speech, the more a person refines their actions, the nicer a person's character appears to be. Because, and we're going to understand this soon, the garments of the soul are not really you.
Yeah, but if you change
So-
your thoughts at some point,
Of course.
you're a pretty nice person, you know?
Of course, if you change your thoughts at some point, you are going to become a very nice person. And even while you're changing your thoughts and you're being nicer, then you're going to be a nice person. But the point is that it's you on a relational level. It's you in relation to others. So we're saying this, that it's still somewhat superficial. It's how you appear to be.
I don't understand how that... I get it for action and speech, thoughts I don't understand.
Okay, that's a very good question. It's very easy to see that for action and speech, but thoughts are harder. We're going to explain that soon. But that's a very good point.
Although
Thoughts are not that unique to you. In order for you even to think, you're thinking with certain patterns, you're thinking with language, you're thinking with the certain social patterns, you're thinking about...
Yeah, but he's saying if you have good thoughts, if you're at some point where you have only good thoughts,
Yeah, that's amazing.
like
It's
he's,
awesome.
he's saying
But it's you in
that you're
relation-
still not necessarily a good person. I'm saying like
No. The point is that we're talking about garments. And garments are not one with the essence of the person. So your thought, and this is unique, I think, to Kabbalistic thinking. I've never seen this in the world of psychology, where that your thoughts are not really part of your essence. That's a big statement.
Exactly.
That's a strong statement.
Exactly,
We're
and I
gonna
don't
we're gonna
agree.
qualify it soon.
Okay.
But it's a strong statement that your thoughts are not part of your essence. Now, the reason,
Because even your thoughts, when you think about it, it's relational in a sense.
Why?
It's relational to...
If you're on a desert island, you're still gonna have thoughts.
Of course.
Sure.
But think about it. Your thoughts are never going to really be divorced from your past or from your society or from your language. If you hadn't learned to speak...
Yeah, but someone who never did any of these things and would be on a desert island from his whole life would still have thoughts.
It would still be a result of their environment. And, you understand?
So this, yeah, but it's not
It's relational.
Okay.
It's relational. It's what he's saying is that it's not your true innermost essence. It's
Exactly.
still relational to your environment. It's like okay,
And,
I don't
and
speak.
environment is Hashem too. So
hold on a second. Before,
Yeah.
I think you guys are getting ahead of yourselves. Let's go through the process, and then I think it's going to become clearer as we go through the process. Now, the reason the word appears is used is that just as clothing doesn't change who you truly are, it doesn't create a smarter or kinder person. You can't put on clothes that's going to make you smarter.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
The garments of the soul, in the same right, don't change the person's essence. Rather, they take what traits we possess, what traits the person possesses, and bring them to the forefront in a nice way. They're relational, completely. And through refining, I'm using key words here, through refining thoughts, through refining our speech, through refining our action, a person actually looks and appears to be nicer, maybe kinder, and maybe even more pleasant than they were before. So this is the reason why Rabbi Shner Zalman, the Alter Rebbe, explains in the Tanya that a Beinoni, who he calls an average person, doesn't have the ability on a conscious level to change their traits from bad to good. All the Beinoni, all the average person can accomplish is to subdue evil thoughts, to control their improper, unrefined conversation, and to act in accordance with God's directives. So, there are different levels, just to go through the Tanya's understanding of this. There are different types of people. There are the 5 levels. The Tanya starts off in chapter 1. There is the tzaddik, the righteous person. There are someone who can be born, and I say gift, that's why I was using the word gift before. Someone who can be born and they have no evil thoughts. It's very few people in the world. Very few people in history that have been born. They're born and there's no evil thoughts. Then there's someone who is able to also, there's another version of it. I'm not going to. What I want to get to is the Beinoni. The Beinoni is someone who is constantly bombarded by evil thoughts but doesn't ever act on them. Now, to be constantly bombarded by evil thoughts and not act on them means that the thought and the action cannot be part of you. Because if the thought and the action were both part of your essence, then you couldn't think something and say the opposite. You couldn't think something and do the opposite. If they were one with you, then you would have to be completely one with your thoughts and your speech and your action.
Like a psychopath.
Exactly.
Schizo.
Yeah, it would be somewhat
I remember
schizo.
also another concept that was associated to essence was the concept of it's whole. It's indivisible, it's whole, it extends.
Exactly.
So if it's really whole, then you can't really go against it. The fact that you can go against it means it's not your essence. It could be something else. It's your thoughts, it's your thought patterns. It's still a part of you.
Right.
It's not. What you're saying is, in this scheme, it's not your essence.
It's not. If it was your essence, if your thought, your speech, and your action were your essence, you would not be able to think something and do something else. And we can do that. And many of us do that often.
Okay, what does it say? It says at the beginning, like, that we don't have a chance to change our traits. Is that what you said?
It's difficult.
What did it say? It said
No. That what?
you started reading and said it's difficult to change our traits, and that's what
Essence.
that's only the word it said. But
Midot, which
So
which
midot,
are
like
connected
the
to your
spirit?
essence. Yes.
So we can't change that.
No. We cannot change the essence of who we are.
But they get changed by changing something else.
But we can change other things. If you want to make a change, how do you make a change? You change your thought, your speech, and your action, which are not one with your essence. And eventually, as Alana was saying, it's going to affect your essence. That's a reality. It's going to affect you. Eventually. Right? So now.
What you actually said at the beginning, you said an essence doesn't change easily. So you can influence it.
You can definitely influence. Think about it. Like Leo was saying, if you end up doing good things for a long time, you're going to be a nicer person. But the fact of the matter is, it is somewhat superficial because it's a relational part of yourself. It's not an essence. It's not the core identity part of yourself.
I get it, but for the thoughts, I don't get it.
Okay, we're going to get to thoughts. We're going to get there soon. So now let's understand how the garments of the soul operate. Remember, the garments of the soul are the reference to thought, speech, and action. How do they actually operate? Kabbalah explains how they operate by introducing the following ideas. In Kabbalistic teachings, there's a concept called olamot. Olamot means worlds. This refers to the creation of the supernal spiritual realms that express a certain degree of godly unity.
I need you to repeat that.
No problem. There are supernal spiritual realms. There are worlds. Those worlds express a particular degree of what we're going to call godly unity. Now, let's explain it. The four worlds are like this. The world that is closest to God, if we call God Atzmut, or we call Or Ein Sof, the light that has no ends. That's the reference, the Kabbalistic reference to God. So the world that's closest to God is the world of Atzilut. This is the world that's closest. Below that world is the world called Bria, which is the world of creation. Below that world is the world called Yetzira, which is the world of formation. And below that world the world of Atzilut means close and adjoining. That's what Atzilut means. This expression of godliness is close and it's near to the subjects that exist in that state of consciousness. So you would have to be in a very, very spiritual or supernal level in order to be able to live in the world of Atzilut. In the realm of Bria, you already see that there's a disconnect from the essence of God. God has removed himself one step from being totally near to his subjects. In fact, God has, the word Bria means creation. So God has created something that, again, I'm going to use this word, appears to be outside of himself. Again, we're using this key word appears to be, because the same way that other things appear to be, this also, on a relational level, appears to be. So, Bria, the world of Bria, through, and I'm going to use a word that we've used before in this class, through Tzimtzum, through this, this process of God removing himself, because if it was God's total essence, everything would be burned up. It would be, complete oblivion. So God has to remove his essence to a certain extent from Atzilut in order for Atzilut to exist. But now, in the world of Bria, which is the created world, God has to remove himself even a little more than that in order for there to be space for someone else. Think about a relationship for a second. If you want to be relational, if you want to be in a relationship, you must remove part of yourself in order to make space for someone else to be in your life. I think that in our society, one of the big problems with relationships is that people are full of themselves too much, and there's no space in their life for someone else.
Unless, of course, you want to have an instrumental relationship with someone. An instrumental relationship is a relationship where somebody is the object of your desires. So they can give you something you want.
But it's how long would that last? How long would an instrumental relationship last? It's not going to last 50 years.
I believe there are relationships out there that are mutual instrumental relationships. But it only lasts for as long as the bargain works.
I don't want to live in an instrumental, mutually beneficial relationship.
Of course you don't. But
Well, in a business partner, right? But
in the
not
business
the
world,
dating.
that is the default.
Yeah, but
In the business world, I would also not want to live in that world. I don't want to live in an instrumental relationship in business either.
Yeah. It's a discussion I have a lot with people because I say, like, if you don't have a true relationship with someone, if the person doesn't truly care about your well-being and is willing to sacrifice something for your well-being, if you don't have that, I always tell them you can have an 80-page contract with all the bells and whistles. But as soon as it's going to make sense in the outside world for the relationship to crumble, the human being is very ingenuous. You're going to find 1,000,001 ways to find loopholes. So an 80-page contract is actually not as solid as a little bit of real good faith with a person and a napkin.
I did a funeral yesterday of a very special man, and I'll tell you one aspect of his life. His name was Otto, and he owned,
I saw that in the
Yeah,
paper,
yeah. And he owned, for many years, he owned a Texaco gas station on Victoria. And he owned it with a partner. And they had a deal, the two of them. They would each take 1 month vacation a year. They would go away with their families. And the rule was, this is the way his son said it to me, if the place had burned down and the insurance wasn't paying for it, that would be the only reason why you'd call him.
Catastrophe.
No, it wasn't. Because it reminds us of who we really are and what's important about us. And I think it's a great lesson to be learned in a world that you say that everything is just easily dispensable. The ability that you have to literally be in a partner. So it's not only in a romantic relationship. In a business relationship, I think the same thing applies. The trust, the communication, all those elements are so important as well.
When you think about it, there's a lot of features of the modern world in general that encourage the development of these instrumental relationships. Number one, when there is no more common values between people don't feel like they speak the same language at the values level. Number two, speed. We have no time, so
right.
You can't develop a true relationship with someone if you're not spending any time with them, including inside your own family.
If you're not being relational with them.
Not being relational.
Relationship, the definition of relationship is that you need to be relational.
That's right.
So let's go back to these levels of God. So the first level of God's relationship with us is this world of Atzilut. Then goes into the created world, the world of Bria. Now, in order for Bria to truly exist, there needs to be the appearance of something that's outside of God himself. A world that feels and thinks of itself outside and separate from God. Is it actually outside and separate from God? Obviously not. But it needs to think that. God doesn't need to think that, but it needs to think that. And obviously you can start seeing the sparks of what will end up being our world. In this concept of the world of Bria, in this concept of the world of creation, of the world of Bria, that creation of something from nothing, which is called yesh me'ayin. We call that something from nothing, that we discussed earlier. This idea that we don't even understand what that means. Creating the world something from nothing. Everything that we call creative is something from something. We have no concept of creating something from nothing. Right? The old joke, when the scientists come to God and say, we don't need you anymore, we can now create our own person, you can go do whatever you want, the world is fine now. And so God says, okay, so show me. So he's like, well, you start with this piece of DNA. He says, go get your own DNA.
Yeah. You know what's very interesting about this guy? We go back to the origins of the entire cosmos, let's say, right? So the Big Bang concept. In the discussions of the Big Bang, overlayered with the discussion about whether or not there's a God, okay?
Right.
In that whole discussion, people often frame the alternatives as, okay, well, there's something that comes from God, right? And then the other people say, no, there's something, but it comes from nothing. And Kabbalah actually tells you that they're both actually the same thing.
That's right.
It tells you that we define the process of creation as yesh me'ayin, which sounds like the way that a self-identifying atheistic scientist would say. That's what they would say.
Right.
They would say it's yesh me'ayin.
That's interesting, right?
And Kabbalah kind of agrees with them in a
Right.
sense.
Look,
So it just changes the parameters of what we're talking about when we're talking about God.
right. The whole creative process needs to have within it creation. To go from nothing to something in the true creative process means that it needs to start with nothing. And only then can there be the emergence of something.
So difficult.
Well, of course it's going to be difficult for us to understand because we don't know nothing.
Yeah.
You know, and someone says, oh, what are you doing? You say nothing. You're not doing nothing. At every moment in time, we're doing something. And anything that we think that is truly creative is something from something. We don't know something from nothing.
Even the word nothing, it's like, it's not really what it seems to be, because it's really, what we mean is the following. We actually mean nothing that I can understand. Because
Or nothing that I can put my words to.
Yeah, that's right. It's like
right? I'm trying to
nothing
be
that's gonna fit
relational.
my concepts.
And again, one of the garments of the soul is speech. So part of that is the speech. There's nothing that I can put words to. So what we should really be saying is not nothing, but nothing at this moment that I could put words to. But I'm definitely feeling something. I'm definitely doing something. I'm definitely breathing air, if anything.
It's like with the scientists say, when people say what came before the Big Bang, and so again, scientists would say the same thing that Kabbalah says, like, you have no frame of reference for thinking about that.
Exactly.
It's like you are a being in space and time, and you're talking about something
Right.
that existed before space and time. So just like stop wasting your time. So above your pay grade.
One of the examples I always give is what came before the Big Bang? Kajumaba.
Was that?
Exactly. You can say whatever you want. That's a word that I made up.
Exactly. Yeah.
You can say whatever you want because there's no way that we can relate to it.
It's really interesting because then I realized like we do have like holiness in place and time,
We have holiness in place and time.
which
Yes.
is really interesting.
Yes.
And that,
If you think about it in that reference, absolutely. So now we're starting this kind of spark of the creative process. The third manifestation of God is this third world, which is the world of Yetzirah. It's also called the world of formation. This means the following, that not only has God given the potential for an entity outside of his total unity to exist, but even more so, the entity actually starts taking a form of its own, solidifying its status of concealing God. So now it's almost the opposite. In the world of formation, you can imagine what's created in the world of formation? Most of the angels.
The angels are in Yetzirah.
There's some angels in Bria, but most angels in Yetzirah.
Atzilut, only God.
Only God.
In other words, it's so close
Oh, there
to
could be
God.
some kind of spiritual...
Like essence or-
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Now we go on to the most important of the four levels. The fourth level, which is the level of godliness that's in the world of Asiya. The world of Asiya is called the world of action, and you can imagine what's in this world. In this world, there's not only the potential for a real physical world, and not only does it begin forming its own dynamics, but in this realm, God is completely hidden. All that is felt is action. Action without a realization that something had to make it possible for that act to happen. It's actually possibly in a total denial that God made it happen. You could live in the world of action and not believe in God, because God is so concealed to the point where you can even think God doesn't exist.
Now you're speaking our language. That's our world.
No, that's our world.
Yeah.
Of course it's our world. Our world is the world of action. Kabbalah explains that the Kabbalah explains that the fourth world, the world of Asiya, is still very much a spiritual concept. Even though it makes a lot of sense. Even though it fits, like you said, the context of the science of our world and the makeup of our world, it's still very much a spiritual concept. What follows from that is the creation of an actual physical universe. Remember, in the world of Asiya, in its real state, there's the potential for a universe, but there's not an actual universe. But what ends up happening is, as a result of the potential for a universe, there is the creation of an actual universe, in which this universe, God is concealed from the human eye. So once the true creative process happens for God to create this world, once that happens, it's God is concealed from the human eye. Now, all of these worlds are not only to be understood as metaphysical thoughts, which are removed from our real world. Rather, they're very real ideas, right here on earth. Every individual, every single one of us, can express and possess one or more of these four levels. All it takes is a consciousness effort to recognize what is going on in life. So, for instance, let's say an individual, myself, someone else, desires to be godly. Let's say I want to be godly all the time. How do I be godly all the time in this world? I'm godly by obeying God's commandments and not succumbing to the world temptations. In this moment, if I decide to be in this moment, this is an expression of Atzilut. Because I am close and near to God. And therefore, at this moment, I feel a complete unity.
Even if it's Shilul Lishma?
It's impossible for it to be not.
Lishma?
It has to be Lishma.
You just do it. You
Okay, yes. The answer is even if you don't mean it. Even if you don't mean it, yes. If you are, which means, but think about it. When I used to teach in elementary school, I used to say that if you want to do well in my class, all you have to do is slant. It was a mnemonic for sit up, lean forward, ask question, nod, and take notes. I guarantee you, if you're an elementary school kid and you're sitting in my class and you're sitting up, leaning forward, asking questions, nodding, and taking notes, it's genuine. You can't do that without being genuine. So yeah, you don't have to even mean it. Just all you have to do is slant. And sometimes in my classroom I would say slant, and everybody knew what that meant. They would, because it actually is a physical action, right? Where you have to sit up and lean forward. So if you are really in this level where you're
what's the acronym for sit down, lean back, and shut up? Because that's what elementary school is actually like.
So if you're actually in the state of closeness to God, where you're actually, you're not succumbing to corporal temptations. You're totally obeying God's commandments. You can fake it all you want, but you're not faking it. If you're really doing it, you're not faking it. Now, on the other hand, when you feel like doing God's will, let's say sometimes, but at other times you want to goof off. This is an expression of one of the other three worlds. Because automatically, what do you have? You have some of yourself outside of God in that conversation. The moment you say, I want to do my own thing. We had a debate on Monday night in our class about the difference between being independent and being a follower. In our world, it was a bit of an existential moment that I had really understanding this in the class. In our world, we all want to be independent thinkers. We all want to be independent doers. We want to experience everything in our world in my own way. Now, what do I say? I'm going to follow when I want to follow. That's not being a follower. If you talk about follow as on one extreme and independent thinking is on the other extreme, and I'm going to follow when I want, no, that means you're always being an independent thinker because you're going to decide what to follow. Being a follower in this connection is that you really, genuinely, for this moment, could you imagine going to a mentor, going to a rabbi, going to a teacher and saying, I have a question for you. And whatever you answer, I'm going to do. No, we don't do that. I'll ask you a question. And if I think it's a good idea, I'll accept your answer. But if it doesn't make sense in my way of thinking. So the notion is, when you go to someone and ask for advice, that you know everything already. You must know everything.
Unless you willingly, voluntarily give away some of because you rationally know that in this domain, your old ways of thinking didn't work. And you didn't know. And that takes what? Humility. You
have to have humility.
Without it's that tzimtzum.
That's right. What we talked about last week.
You can take all the advice in the world. You can read all the books in the world.
Exactly.
And you pick and choose when to do what. You've done actually nothing at all. All you've done is you've put a halo over your head, right? And you've given nice names and, right? To different things.
In our world, everything's a survey, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll go to this one. I'll ask advice. I'll go to this one. But what do we do at the end of the day? We're just looking for the person who's going to already just kind of mimic what we knew already. It's not real advice. We're not really looking for advice. We're looking for someone to justify what we already planned. So what you're doing is you're coming to this with a tremendous amount of ego. You're saying, I already know everything. And the world doesn't exist outside of me. Mm-hmm. That is a siyah. Where everything that you as the mentor or that you as the person who's giving me advice can give me doesn't really exist because I already know everything. It's to the point where I'm going to say, I'm just asking you why for the appearance that I am doing something. We're going back to the word appearance. You see how we're making the connection between the spiritual level and the physical level? It's the appearance that I'm actually asking for advice. But really, I was just asking for someone and sometimes people come to me, ask me questions, and say, what do you want me to answer? Just tell me what you want to answer and I'll answer it for you so it can justify whatever you're trying to say. And you can see it. They're not looking for an answer. They're not looking for the change. If you're looking for a genuine answer, if you're going to go to someone for advice, and you're going to be able to truly be a follower, then you must say, I don't know what the answer is going to be. And it could be that I'm not going to like the answer, but I'm going to do it anyway. That's hard. That's very hard.
It's a confrontation with the unknown, which is what we are naturally, we go away from it because we're scared of the unknown.
We'll try everything in our power not to experience the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to experience the unknown? I want to be in control. What you're saying is I'm giving up control of my life for a moment to something higher than myself. Oh, no.
What you're saying about the advice is something I see a lot of in my world, and I see it a lot lately, where people will listen or will act like they listen to other people. And it's funny because sometimes, in a situation, you can be kind of an innocent bystander. You can just see a clash of two worlds. I see this person with this kind of experience and this person with a completely different experience. They don't speak the same language. They're getting together because they want to make a deal eventually, right?
Right.
And I see the clash of worlds. I just witness it from a distance. And it's unbelievable how some people, they kind of know that they need to have a conversation with this other world that they don't know about. In theory, they know that, right? So they're in the room, right?
Right.
Because in theory, they know that. And then when they actually confront that other world, I see that it means absolutely nothing to them because their whole thinking is imprisoned inside of certain thought patterns, inside of grammar, inside of what they see. They literally cannot see what they don't see. They cannot see what they don't see. And that's okay. I think it's normal for everybody. But when the person doesn't have the humility of shutting up a little bit and contracting themselves a little bit and having that humility, the malchut, it's the beginning. If they don't have that humility, you see how you can be in a room for 4 hours. The person that has something critical to bring to the table spoke for an hour and a half, and I know nothing was done.
Right.
It's unbelievable.
There's people who go on a date and they talk about themselves the whole time, and afterwards they say, so what do you say about me?
Right. That's funny.
So, think about this process and how it can very easily relate to the way that we live our world, in our world. So, depending on the expression of the other three worlds. So let's say depending on how a person is removed, or how removed they are from, let's say, the essence of God, because that's what we're talking about here. If the majority of the time the person feels this way, then they're going to be expressing the world of Yetzirah. If you really feel like I want to be one with God, which I don't know how many people are actually able to do that. It's very difficult in our society. But if you feel that it's only the minority of the time, then this would be a manifestation of the world of Bria. What all this points to is that these very high, these esoteric, these lofty ideas begin with our personal status. Today, tomorrow, the next day. Who am I? How do I fit in the grand scheme of this world, in the grand scheme of society? Where do I fit in it? Am I alone? Am I relational? Am I connected to myself? Am I connected to others? Do I feel satisfied, comfortable in my own skin, or do I not? Kabbalah explains that the world of Bria, this world of creation, is compared to thought. It's compared to machshava. Just as thought is constant and totally private, so too does the notion of Bria represent a constant and private notion of creation. This means that in the physical universe, from Bria's perspective, from the world of Bria, from the world of creation's perspective, it's still very much bound and connected to God in a way that doesn't allow for any separateness. But it's separate. It's already somewhat removed, but like us, we can't ever stop thinking. And we think that I can think something and say something else. What I think, people think this, it's not true. We'll talk about this in a second. But people think that whatever I think is really mine and no one has any idea what I'm thinking. This is why machshava, thought, is called levush hamayuchad, which means a designated, constant garment. A designated, constant garment. It's constantly working even when we sleep. Thought doesn't stop until the very last moment of life. And according to Kabbalah, even after life as well, thought still moves to a certain extent. In this sense, thoughts are very private. They're subordinate to the sefirot, to the kochot hanefesh, to the power of the soul. Bria, the world of creation, is the same way. It is the beginning of creation, in that it has been removed from God's world. It's been removed from the world of Atzilut, but it's not yet identifiable because the godly energy of Atzilut overshadows it. On the other hand, you see where we're going with this, speech and action are compared to the worlds of Yetzirah and Asiya. Asiya, we know, is the world of action. But Yetzirah is the world of speech. Yetzirah is the formation world. It's the formation and development of a world by exemplifying the radiance of God as a lead-in to reality. Dibur as we call it, speech, also manifests this idea within the human framework. When a person talks, they're allowing someone outside of themselves to become involved in their life. So the mere fact that the purpose of speech is that people can understand each other reveals two things. The first thing it reveals is that speech is relational. Speech is not private in nature. And number two, it reveals that speech is not continuous. Sometimes people talk, and sometimes they're quiet. So in the same vein, Yetzirah is such that it's another removal from the oneness of God. Yetzirah isn't as close to God as Bria, which is a closer level to God. Just as thought is further from a person's essence than speech. Thought is constant and private. Sorry, the speech is further from the essence than thought. Thought is constant and private, and speech is irregular and public. This is why speech is called levush hanifrad. Levush hanifrad, it's over here on our board, is a garment that has been separated from the person. This garment isn't here just for the person, but it's here for the outside as well. So since dibur, since speech is a levush hanifrad, which means what? That it's a garment that has been separated from the person. Ma'aseh, action, is all the more a levush hanifrad. It's all the more separated from the person. Action is entirely removed from the person's intellectual and emotional experience. Action requires more effort and is more intermittent than speech. You see how it works on the gradation of the levels?
Requires more effort
and more intermittence
right.
than speech. Right? If thought never stops, and speech sometimes stops and sometimes
Action
goes.
is hard.
Action, I mean, how often, I mean, when we're doing, it's definitely less than when we're speaking. So it's even more, and action, I would say, is the most public part of ourselves. More than speech.
What's more difficult? Like, isn't action more difficult in a way? It requires more
It would definitely require,
commitment and
for sure. For sure, action.
because talk is cheap.
Yeah, of course, right? As they say, talk is cheap. Action is for sure more difficult. That's the
and
point.
according to this scheme, thinking is even cheaper.
That's right. But we're going to see how it works the way up. Now
So this maybe should be the most.
but see, now we're working our way down,
That's right.
and soon we're going to work our way back up.
Yeah, because when we look at right, when we look at just from the standard sort of religious framework, it's all about your actions.
It's all about your actions.
Yeah.
So
That's
really
right.
This is like the most holy.
Or maybe this is the place where we can right. We need to work on the most to achieve. Yeah?
So let's just finish this thought. Ma'aseh, action, is compared to olam ha'asiyah, to the world of action. In olam ha'asiyah, in the world of action, godliness is completely concealed. Yet at the same time, it is what we call olam ha'asiyah. What does that mean? That it actualizes the reality of creation that began in the world of Bria, in the world of creation. It's only the action that is able to actualize the purpose for creation. And that is why a mitzvah is an action.
Yeah.
A mitzvah must be an action, because it's only through action that we're able to actualize the purpose of creation. You follow?
It's very interesting when we say the purpose of creation. We don't think about it like this, but yeah, there's a phase which is creation, and the creation only gets fully realized by the action.
That's right.
So the purpose of creation is action.
Which means,
It's not
imagine
like
if a mitzvah was a thought.
It's not a theory. It's kind of like it's like a wiring of how reality works. You know, it's not like a.
It is. It's the inner wiring
It's
and the
like
workings of
inner
reality.
Wiring more than it is like a cool idea. You know, that's the way that it's.
Imagine for a second. Let's just entertain this. Imagine that a mitzvah was a thought. What would happen?
Not much.
Could you imagine if it was a mitzvah to think a certain thing? That would be very hard. It'd be very hard. So it's almost, it's a gift for us because it's not practical for a mitzvah to be thought. And to a certain extent, it's not even practical for a mitzvah to be speech. Because
it's fleeting.
It could be yes or no, and you can say one thing and you can mean something else, and you can mean something and you can say something else. But action, we know what you did. I took the pen out of the jar and I put it on the table. We know, it's clear. And that's why if you look at the way the Torah looks at all of this, you're going to see that the Ten Commandments are not, if it's interesting, I often ask students, what's your manifesto? If you had 1 minute to tell the world something, what would you say? And often I get these really vague ideas like, I want to make the world a better place, or the golden rule, do only to someone what you wouldn't do, or one of these really nice, memes from Facebook. Yesterday somebody was memeing because I was at the funeral. Somebody said a very nice line that somebody said, someone said that you only die once, but you live every day. Somebody said, I only live once, but the other one said, you only die once, you live every day. It's a meme from one of these memes. The point is that the Torah is very direct. If you look at the Ten Commandments, you're going to see they're very direct. They're not make the world a better place. Tikkun olam, repair the world. That's not what it's saying. It's saying a very direct thing. Do not murder. How do you interpret that? Do not murder. Do not steal. Do not covet thy neighbor's wife and possessions. Believe in one God. Do not have any other gods. Honor your father and mother. They're very, very direct. They're directives. I would call them not commandments, but rather directives, because they're direct. Even though in our definition of directive, it means a good idea. But I'm saying that they're direct. They're not vague. You don't have to spend time interpreting them. And that's the entire point of what a mitzvah is. If you want to actualize the purpose of creation, you must do action. And that's why this world is called the world of Asiya, the world of action, because it makes sense that of the three garments of thought, speech, and action, that action should be the main thing. And if you want to actualize the purpose of creation, do.
So basically we can say that actions are coming from God, or only we can say that good actions are coming from God.
No, everything is coming from God. But if you want to actualize the purpose for which you were created, you have to do something. You can't think. You know how people say, I don't have to do anything. I have God in my heart. Could you imagine if you did something by, you know what? I don't have to work today. I have my work in my heart. What would your employer say? No, really, I'm very connected with you. And in my heart, I feel very connected with you as my employer. So I'm going to come and I'm going to punch and I'm going to feel in my heart at this moment all of the work which I must do for you.
However, because we are limited creatures, the nature of our action is also going to be influenced by the nature of our speech and the nature of our thoughts. And so the refinement at those levels is necessary in order to be properly oriented in our action, right? Because we can.
The point is that at this moment,
different ways.
but I want to clarify, at this moment, because we haven't gone into the next level, But at this level that we're talking about now, action is the main thing. So if you thought something negative, and if you even said something negative, but you did something positive, that's the main thing. We want you, if you can think whatever you think at this moment. Yeah, you can refine your thoughts. Yeah, you can refine your speech. But if you thought one thing, and you spoke one thing, but you did the right thing, that's the main thing. At the end,
what about Lashon Hara?
okay,
Sometimes
again,
speech is an action.
we're going to get there. We're going to get to that level. But right now, if you had a choice between the three garments of the soul, you live in the world of action and do. That's the point. This is again, we're only in the basic level of the three garments. Next week, we're going to go into the what we call the beautification level. And we're going to understand each of the garments and how they apply to our world as a whole.
This was fantastic. This was so good.
Yes.
Thank you for being here.
It always is very good. Thank you. We're getting there, huh?
Yeah.
We're putting the picture together.
We're putting. That's the point. The point is that you see, you can
we're-
see if from one week to the next how we're actually kind of progressing, and
We're in our
we're
14th month of this.
14th month.
Yeah.
14 months we've been doing
14
this.
months
Wow.
we've been doing this. 14 months exactly. And we are. I think we're getting to complete the picture.
We're getting the emergence
good.
of something real. Yeah, because
And then what we should do is
that
we should
process.
start it over.
Let's do it again. We'll do it again.
We'll do it again.
We'll do it again, and we'll do it on a deeper level.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. Okay. Well, let's go
This
on.
could be a curriculum. This could be like a yearly curriculum.
Yeah.
Do it yearly, and then it's like you have to redo it every year. You never pass. You never pass the class because it's infinite how deep.
On to studying some Talmud.